In this video, I'm going to show you guys how to make rendered playfield shadows that have nice soft edges like you see here. Okay, this is the VPW example table, and the GI looks like this. It's kind of a mess. I want to get rid of all of these like shaped lights and replace them with a shadow layer. With a shadow layer that's created in Blender, you can make shadows around the slingshots and other objects on your playfield. They make them look a lot more realistic. So first step is to clean up all these lights and kind of just make them circular. Okay, here we go. And when you replace the GI lights, make sure that you make note of all the collections that the previous GI lights were in and make sure it's all the same as before. Another little tip is to cut off the edge of the light areas around the perimeter of the table, because if they stick out, you can see the light stick out through the walls of the cab if you're in virtual reality. All right, so we're going to save this, and the next step is to import it into Blender using the Blender Toolkit import tool. You don't necessarily have to do it that way, but it makes it a ton easier. So I highly recommend installing the Blender Toolkit if you have not done that already. Okay, we're in Blender. Going to click the import tool and import our example table. Now it's going to import everything, including the VR room. So we'll hide those in a minute. But very first thing to do is select, well, for the hidden collection, we're going to hide those from view and from the render. You know, VLM or the toolkit, it tries to organize your collections for you when you import a table. So there's the hidden collection, the bake collection, the lights collection. Inside the bake collection, there's some sub collections like playfield and parts. We're going to select everything in the parts collection just with like a shift click to select them all. And come down to object properties, visibility, and with the Alt button held down, we're going to unclick all the ray visibilities except for shadow. Going to do the same thing with all the other sub collections in the bake collection. Okay. Now up at the top here, click on the playfield object, and you want to make sure that the shadow catcher mask is selected. Now let's go and hide a few things we don't want to see. So you can click on any object, press the M button, and move it to a different collection. So I want to move it to the hidden collection. In fact, the entire VR cab, let's hide that. So I think those are in the parts collection somewhere. Yeah, all of these, select them all, press M. Okay. Now, so everything that's visible will cast a shadow unless you specifically tell Blender to not do that. And for the flippers, for example, we handle the shadows of the flippers differently in VPX. So I'm going to not include the flipper shadows in this render. So just double click, or so just single click on each of those. If you have them both selected, you can Alt click and come over and uncheck renders here, and that'll just turn off the render for them. Okay, so for casting shadows on the playfield, we really want to only cast shadows that are generated from the GI lights, not the inserts or anything else. You know, maybe we want to include the environmental lights too. So coming down to the VLM lights, all lights collection, let's just select everything that's not GI and alt click the renders button. The checkbox. So we turn, you can do the same thing by just, you know, unchecking the little camera symbol here, but that's basically all we're doing. So only the GI lights and the environmental lights are going to be included in this render. And it's important to know that for the GI lights, they need to be decently high above the playfield for this to work. Right now, I have them set pretty low. So if I just have them all selected and I press G, Z, I can move those up a bit. So they'll probably be like, I don't know, maybe there. Okay, last step is to set up the camera. Now the camera is automatically placed into the, I think it's the hidden collection. Yeah, so let's move that, just move that into a different collection for now. Let's move it into this thing. See, I think the camera's pretty far away. There it is. So let's center it over the playfield, roughly. And then I'm gonna move it down, GZ. And probably just rotate it to look straight down. So that'd be rotate along the x-axis. Just getting it close. Now going into the, let's see, what is it? The output properties. Let's set up the resolution to be like 4,000 wide. And say, now 2,000. 4,000 tall, 2,000 wide. Doesn't have to be perfect. Going back to the camera, let's set the type to orthographic and then adjust the scale. So this is kind of like what the viewport that we're going to render over. Okay. That's about right. I think we're set up. So going to the render properties, I just want to check that my sample size isn't so super huge. I'm just going to make it 500. And noise threshold of 0.01 is good. For a test render, I'm going to come to the output properties and just reduce the percentage just so I can do a quick test render. Press F12. We're getting shadows, but it does not look like we're getting lights. So something is wrong. What could it be? Okay, I figured out what was going on. There is an overlay called playfield insert outlines in this model that's actually covering up the playfield. So we were getting some weird results with that. If you just click on that, move that over to the hidden collection. We'll do a test render. You can start to see the shadows show up. Of course, everywhere there's a light under the plastics, it'll look pretty bright, and then projecting out from, from those lights, you'll see the shadows. So I'm pretty happy with that. I'm gonna stop the test render, come over to the output, and bump it all the way back up to 100%, and then press F12 and start the full render. So we'll let this run and come back and show you how to put it back into VPX. The render is done. We'll go up to image, save as. And we can close this now. Okay, I also wanted to point out that I hid these drop targets in the previous shadows render because I want to make individual drop target shadows that can be turned on and off as the drop target raises or lowers. To do that, I'm just going to one by one re-render the scene with the drop target showing. And I want to have just the drop target being rendered and nothing else. So going up to our main collections, I can select everything that's not a light and not the playfield. And turn them off. And then I'm just going to select one drop target, turn that guy back on. Let's do a quick test render. All right, you can kind of see that thing showing up. Looks good. I'm going to re-render the entire scene like that. It'll make it easier to line everything up later. So I'm going to do that for all three, and then we'll bring these images into Photoshop and clean them up a little bit, and then into VPX. Okay, here's the shadow render brought into Photoshop. I'm just going to crop it down to the correct dimensions and save it as a new file. So the correct dimensions you can find by opening the table, going over to, clicking on the table, going over to the physics tab, and you can see the table width and height here. Just remember those numbers, and I usually get the select tool and I put it into a fixed aspect ratio with the correct width and height. So usually it's 952 by 2162. If we zoom in to the upper left corner, just kind of select that corner to start with. got it all selected. Just going to crop it and save as. For the drop target shadows, I'm just going to open up all three at once. And I'm going to bring them all into the same document. Just paste in each one as a new layer. Select all, copy, paste. I'm going to add a new layer below the rest and just fill it in with white so I can see the shadows. Again, I'll select with a fixed aspect ratio 1:1 so I get a square. And I think I'll just make sure I encompass all the shading. Just like that. Then I can crop the image, hide the white layer, and I'm just going to hide all but one layer at a time. I'll just save each one individually, and we'll bring them into VPX next. Okay, back in VPX, I've got a layer here called shadows, and it has my old drop target shadow flasher objects on it already. I'm going to add a new flasher, and that will be used to contain the full playfield shadows. So clicking on the corner, the easiest way to get this accurate is to just modify each corner point individually and make the image. Oh, I have to import the images first. So image manager, playfield shadows, we can take a look at what they look like by displaying the image in the editor. Pretty cool. One thing to remember is to change the height of the flasher to be something pretty close to 0, but slightly positive. So let's just do 1, and that'll bring the shadows down to the level of the playfield or just above. Yeah. I'd say that looks pretty good. You might want to drop the opacity of the shadows slightly. Let's try 80. Anyways, you can keep playing around with it. Okay, you can see that I put in the drop target shadows here. There you can see them. They're lined up with the drop targets themselves correctly. And I will toggle them on and off in the script. You can look at the example table if you want to see how that's done. And for the main shadows on the playfield, those will also toggle on and off with the GI turning on and off. Hope that helps you guys out. Thanks for watching.